His hand wrapped around her wrist just as the explosion rocked the warehouse. Smoke swallowed the air. Flames climbed the walls. Somewhere in the distance, gunshots echoed like thunder. Nia's breath trembled beneath him. "Stay with me," Han-seon said. His voice calm, too calm for a man kneeling in fire. For 15 years he had not needed anyone. For 15 years, he had not touched a woman. Not since the night love destroyed his father and nearly shattered his empire. He had buried that weakness. Burned it out of himself. Frozen it. But now he was shielding her with his body as the ceiling cracked above them. His blood stained the concrete. His empire was already gone. Signed away minutes ago. All for her. "Why?" she whispered weakly. "'Cause you made me feel again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the night Nia Adeyemi walked into a room full of monsters and corrected the most dangerous man in Korea. The chandelier light reflected off crystal glasses and polished marble floors. Seoul's elite filled the private ballroom. Politicians, CEOs, syndicate investors. And at the center of it all stood Han Seojun. Black suit. Silver cufflinks. Eyes like carved obsidian. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. Half the city answered to him. The other half feared him. And then Nia Adeyemi spoke. "It's not what the document says." The room went silent. Every head turned. Seojun's gaze shifted slowly toward the soft-spoken African translator standing near the projection screen. She didn't lower her eyes. "You mistranslated the clause," she said gently. "It changes the entire agreement." A murmur rippled through the room. No one corrected Han Seojun. No one. His jaw tightened. "Your name?" he asked. "Nia Adeyemi." She expected to be dismissed. Fired. Humiliated. Instead, something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. And that was the first crack in 15 years of emotional ice. The city of Seoul glittered beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows. A kingdom of glass and light bowing to a man who never bowed to anyone. Han Seojun stood with his hands clasped behind his back, black suit cut to precision, posture effortless, expression unreadable. From 30 floors above the river, the world looked small, manageable, predictable, the way he liked it. Busan shipment secured. One of his executives reported from across the Marble office. Opposition has agreed to the revised terms. Seojun didn't turn around. "Good," he said quietly. That was all. No praise. No satisfaction. Just approval measured in a single word. The men in the room shifted slightly, tension loosening. They lived for those small permissions. For that calm voice that never rose yet carried more weight than shouting ever could. At 32, Han Seojun controlled ports, hotels, investment firms, shipping lanes, and politicians who pretended not to know him. He had inherited chaos at 17 when his father died in a scandal drenched in betrayal and misplaced love. Seojun had rebuilt the empire with colder hands. He had learned 3 rules. Never trust loyalty that costs nothing. Never show emotion in negotiation. And never let a woman become leverage. The 3rd rule had been carved deepest. 15 years ago, he had watched his father crumble for a woman who promised devotion and delivered ruin. It ended in blood, headlines, and vultures circling the family name. Seojun had stood in that wreckage and felt something inside him shut down. Desire was distraction. Attachment was weakness. Love was liability. Since then, women had come and gone like passing weather. Models at galas. Heiresses seeking protection. Socialites hoping proximity to power would warm them. He entertained them when strategy required it. Dismissed them when it didn't. There were no overnight stays. No lingering touches. No vulnerability. No one crossed the threshold of his private suite. He preferred control to comfort. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Chairman!" His mother's voice floated from the doorway. Elegant. Controlled. "The board is pleased with today's decision." Seojun turned then, offering the faintest nod. Madame Han watched her son carefully, as if studying a weapon she had personally forged. You are your father's opposite, she said. That is why this empire survives. Compliment. From her it was currency. He inclined his head again. Sentiment has no place in business. Good, she replied. Keep it that way. When she left, silence reclaimed the office. Seojun returned to the window. The Han River reflected the city lights like scattered diamonds. Somewhere below, people were laughing, falling in love, making promises they would later regret. He felt nothing watching them. No longing, no curiosity, no ache, only clarity. He had disciplined himself so thoroughly that desire no longer knocked at his door. 15 years without needing anyone had turned him into something sharper than human. Precise, unbreakable, untouchable. Or so he believed. Because tomorrow night, at a private syndicate gala, a soft-spoken translator with steady eyes would correct him in a room full of men. And the ice he had perfected for 15 years would feel its first fracture. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the grand ballroom, turning silk gowns and tailored suits into moving reflections of wealth and power. The air carried the scent of expensive perfume and quiet ambition. Seojun stood at the head of the room, one hand resting lightly on the polished table, the other sliding a document toward the foreign investor seated opposite him. His voice was calm, even, controlled. As agreed, the distribution rights transfer at the end of the quarter. Payment in full upon signature. No hesitation. No wasted words. The translator beside the projection screen followed along silently, eyes scanning the Korean and English clauses displayed above them. Nia Adeyemi had been hired only that morning. Temporary staff, recommended for her accuracy and discretion. She stood straight, tablet in hand, charcoal dress simple against the opulence surrounding her. She was meant to blend into the background. Invisible. But as the foreign delegate began to nod in agreement, her brows drew together. Her gaze moved back to the contract, then to the projection, then slowly to Seojun. Her heart pounded. Every instinct told her to stay quiet. Men like him did not appreciate interruptions. But the clause was wrong. If signed as presented, the investors would gain leverage over port access within a year. It was subtle, dangerous. She swallowed. Chairman. The single word cut through the room. Conversations stilled. Chairs shifted. Seojun did not look at her immediately. He finished his sentence, closed the folder. Then his eyes lifted. Black, steady, cessing. Yes. Her pulse thudded in her ears. But her voice when it came was steady. The translation of Clause 7 is incorrect, she said. The secondary condition doesn't transfer distribution rights. It transfers operational oversight. A murmur rippled across the table. The foreign investor stiffened. That is not how it was explained. Seojun's gaze never left Nia. Explain, he said softly. She stepped forward, tapping the screen to highlight the sentence. The phrasing in the original Korean implies temporary partnership, she said. But in English, the structure shifts ownership authority after 12 months. If signed this way, control gradually moves to them. Silence. Heavy. Electric. No one corrected Han Seojun in his own negotiation room. No one. The investor began speaking quickly to his legal advisor. Confusion flickered across faces that had entered the room confident. Seojun's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He had reviewed the document personally. Had he missed it? Or had someone slipped it past his legal team? He turned fully toward her now. What is your name? He asked. Nia Adeyemi. Her eyes did not drop. They should have. Most people couldn't hold his stare for more than a second. She did. Not defiant. Not challenging. Simply honest. I apologize if I overstepped, she added quietly. But it would cost you in a year. Something shifted behind his expression, so subtle only someone watching closely would see it. Not anger. Not humiliation. Interest. He turned back to the investors. We will pause, he said. My legal team will amend the clause. The meeting dissolved into controlled chaos. As executives rushed to correct the oversight, Seojun remained still, watching her. She had not tried to embarrass him. She had protected his empire. And she had done it without trembling. Most women in that room were drawn to power like moths to flame. She had walked into it and spoken. For 15 years, nothing had unsettled him. Yet as Nia stepped back toward the screen, pretending her heart wasn't racing, Seojun felt something unfamiliar stir beneath his carefully constructed composure. Flicker. Dangerous. The first spark in ice that had never cracked. The penthouse was silent when Nia entered. Too silent. The gala had ended hours ago, but the senior staff had been reassigned to reorganize contracts and prepare amended documents. As temporary support, she had been instructed to deliver the corrected files directly to the chairman's private office. She hadn't expected it to be at the top of the building, or to feel like stepping into another world. The elevator opened to a space of glass and shadow. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Han River like a living painting. Dark wood, steel, and charcoal silk dominated the interior. Everything was immaculate, controlled, like him. She set the leather folder on the desk in the adjoining office, careful not to disturb anything. Her heels clicked softly against marble floors as she turned to leave. Then her vision swam. She hadn't eaten since morning. Her shift at the Language Institute had ended at noon. The gala preparation had begun at 3. It was now nearly midnight. Her body, running on caffeine and determination, finally protested. Just a minute, she told herself. She moved toward the sitting area to steady herself, but the plush charcoal sofa looked dangerously inviting. Beyond it, through a partially open door, she glimpsed a bedroom. Minimalist, dimly lit, expansive. She shouldn't. She knew she shouldn't. But exhaustion dulled judgment. The bedroom felt cooler, quieter. The sheets were dark gray silk, smooth as water. She perched carefully at the edge of the mattress, intending only to sit until the dizziness passed. Just a minute. Her eyes closed. The city lights flickered through the curtains. Somewhere below, traffic hummed. Her breathing slowed. And then, the elevator doors opened. Han Seojun stepped into his private suite without removing his jacket. His expression was unreadable, but his mind was not. Nia Adeyemi. The way she had stood in that ballroom. The way she had corrected him without arrogance. It had unsettled him. He disliked being unsettled. He loosened his cufflinks as he walked toward his office, and stopped. The bedroom door was open. He never left it open. His gaze sharpened. He crossed the room silently, controlled steps on marble. Then he saw her, curled slightly at the edge of his bed, shoes still on, one hand resting near her face. Dark curls spilling across charcoal silk like ink in water. For a long moment he simply stared. A woman in his private suite. In his bed. No one entered this space. No one. His jaw tightened. Anger rose automatically, cold and precise. He stepped forward, reaching to wake her. But as he did, she shifted. Her body tipped backward, sliding toward the edge of the mattress. Instinct overrode irritation. He caught her. His hand closed around her waist. The other braced her shoulder before her head could strike the marble floor. Her weight settled against him. Warm. Her face tilted upward, lashes fluttering, lips parting slightly in sleep. And then something happened. His pulse misfired. A sharp, unfamiliar heat moved through him. Fast, unwelcome. 15 years. 15 years of absolute control. He did not react to women. He did not feel this. Her eyes opened slowly. Confusion. Then awareness. She inhaled sharply, realizing whose arms held her. They froze. Her palm pressed lightly against his chest to steady herself. Through thin fabric, he felt the warmth of her hand. Too close. Far too close. You, she breathed. His voice came out lower than intended. You fell asleep. A simple statement. But the air between them had changed. Because for the first time in 15 years, Han Seojun was not entirely in control of what he was feeling. And that frightened him more than any enemy ever had. She pulled away first. "I'm sorry," Nia said quickly, stepping back as if distance could undo what had just happened. "I didn't mean to, I was just dizzy and I thought I would sit for a moment. I didn't realize this was my private suite," Seojun finished calmly. Her throat tightened. "Course it was." He watched her straighten her dress, dignity returning piece by piece. Most people would have panicked, begged, over-explained. He didn't. She simply met his gaze. "I shouldn't have crossed that line," she said quietly. "It won't happen again." Line. The word lingered in the air. Seojun had built his life on lines. Clear boundaries. Strict discipline. No emotional entanglements. No vulnerability inside these walls. Yet he had caught her instead of letting her fall. He stepped back now, restoring physical space. "You corrected a clause that could have cost me billions," he said. "Why?" She blinked, thrown by the shift. "Because it was wrong." "People don't correct me because something is wrong," he replied. "They stay silent because they're afraid. I wasn't trying to embarrass you." "I know." That was the problem. She hadn't been trying to impress him either. She had acted on principle. He moved toward the window, looking out at the river, though he was acutely aware of her presence behind him. "Do you know why I don't allow anyone up here?" he asked. She hesitated. "No. Because this is the only place in the city where no one expects anything from me." The admission surprised even him. He rarely explained himself. "To them," he continued, voice even, "I am an asset, a weapon, a decision-maker, not a man." Nia listened without interrupting. "My father believed love made him stronger," Seojun said. "He trusted the wrong person. Cost him his life. It nearly cost us everything." He turned then. "For 15 years, I have not allowed emotion to dictate a single choice." The weight of that confession settled between them. Nia studied him carefully. Not with fear. Not with awe. With understanding. "That sounds lonely," she said softly. "Lonely." The word struck harder than any accusation. "I prefer controlled," he replied. "Control isn't the same as peace." He felt something tighten in his chest. Dangerous territory. "You speak as if you know." "My father left when I was young," she said. "My mother taught me that needing people makes you weak. I believed her for a long time. And now I think pretending you don't need anyone is its own kind of weakness." Silence filled the room. He should dismiss her. Reinforce the boundary. Instead he found himself asking, "And you think I'm pretending?" "I think," she said carefully, "that you've convinced yourself you don't feel anything. That doesn't mean it's true." Their eyes held. The air felt charged, quiet but electric. "I don't lose control," he said. "You caught me before I fell." Small thing. Yet it wasn't. He could have stepped aside. He hadn't. His jaw tightened. That was instinct. Instinct comes from somewhere. She wasn't challenging him. She was seeing him. And for the first time in 15 years, Han Seojun felt something crack beneath the ice he had perfected. "You should go," he said, voice lower now. Not cold, controlled. She nodded. But before she reached the door, he spoke again. "Nia." He turned. "You were right tonight." Was. "And I'm glad you spoke." It wasn't a grand declaration. But for a man who had spent 15 years refusing vulnerability, it was a rule broken. And they both felt it. The change was subtle at first. A half-second delay before Seojun dismissed a proposal. A softened tone when he corrected an executive. The faintest crease between his brows. Not irritation but distraction. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But the men who built empires by reading silence did. The boardroom on the 25th floor felt colder than usual. Long black table. Floor-to-ceiling glass. 6 senior directors seated in perfect symmetry. Seojun stood at the head as always, reviewing quarterly reports. "Shipment routes through Incheon will be rerouted," he said evenly. We minimize customs exposure. No one challenged him. They never did. But today eyes lingered. When the meeting adjourned, only one man remained seated. Director Kwon was older, sharp-featured, careful with his words. He folded his hands neatly. You've been preoccupied lately, he said. Seojun did not react. With what? Details. Details we once assumed you'd never overlook. The air shifted. Seojun met his gaze. Be specific. You allowed a temporary translator to interrupt a closed negotiation, Kwon said. You reassigned her personally. And you've requested her presence at 3 internal reviews since. None of it illegal. None of it dramatic. But noticeable. She corrected a flawed clause, Seojun replied. That is competence. Competence rarely results in personal oversight from the chairman. The implication hung unspoken. Seojun's expression remained calm, but something colder entered his eyes. You mistake efficiency for favoritism. Kwon held his stare. Do I? Silence stretched. In another part of the building, Nia was reviewing export summaries, unaware of the scrutiny forming around her name. Seojun moved toward the window, hands behind his back. You are concerned, he said quietly, that I am compromised. I am concerned, Kwon replied carefully, that the empire depends on your discipline. Discipline that has never wavered. A softer voice joined from the doorway. Love makes men predictable. Madame Han stepped inside without waiting for invitation. Elegant as ever, pearl earrings catching the light. Kwon bowed his head slightly and excused himself. Mother and son were alone. You're listening to rumors, Seojun said. I listen to patterns, she replied. Her heels clicked softly against marble as she approached. You've built this empire on emotional restraint, she continued. No scandals. No attachments. No leverage. There is no leverage, he said. Then why, she asked gently, does her name appear in internal schedules? He didn't answer. Her gaze sharpened. I warned you when you were 17, she said. Sentiment destroyed your father. His enemies used it. They will use it again. He turned to face her fully now. You mistake clarity for attachment, he said. She is useful. Be careful, she replied softly. Usefulness can become necessity before you realize it. The warning was not loud. It didn't need to be. After she left, Seojun remained still for a long moment. Across the city, alliances shifted quietly. Rivals watched. Investors listened. Weakness, even perceived weakness, invited ambition. He told himself nothing had changed. He still made decisions with logic. Still controlled every variable. Still untouched. And yet, when Nia entered his office later that evening with updated reports, he looked up immediately. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And in empires like his, want was the first crack enemies searched for. The warning came quietly. Not through threats. Not through raised voices. Through patterns. Nia began noticing it in the small things. The way conversations stopped when she entered certain rooms. The way 2 directors glanced at her before lowering their voices. Security that once ignored her now tracked her movements with careful attention. She wasn't naive. Empires did not shift without resistance. And she had become a variable. That evening, she stood alone on the balcony outside Seojun's office, the wind lifting loose strands of her hair as the Han River shimmered below. The city felt vast, unforgiving. Footsteps approached behind her. You're leaving early, Seojun said. I finished the report. That isn't what I meant. He turned. He looked composed as always. Dark suit, steady gaze. But there was tension beneath it. Something coiled and waiting. They're watching me, she said quietly. He didn't deny it. They watch everything. No, she said softly. They're watching you. And I'm the reason. His jaw tightened. You are not responsible for political paranoia. This isn't paranoia. Her voice was gentle but firm. You built this empire on discipline, on being untouchable. I can feel it shifting. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Let it. It won't be that simple. Silence stretched between them. For weeks, they had hovered at the edge of something neither named. Late-night conversations, subtle confessions, proximity that felt less like coincidence and more like gravity. But gravity pulled things down as easily as it pulled them together. I don't want to be used against you, she said. No one would dare. You know that isn't true. He did. Rivals exploited leverage. Board members calculated advantage. His mother believed emotion was contamination. You think leaving fixes that? He asked. I think removing the threat might. His gaze hardened. You are not a threat. I am the only thing that's changed. The truth of it hung heavy. She stepped back, increasing the distance between them. I didn't come to Seoul to disrupt your world, she continued. I came to build my own. And you are, he said. With me. The words slipped out before he could weigh them. Her breath caught. That was the closest he had come to naming it. But she shook her head slowly. With you, she repeated softly. That's the problem. He reached for her hand instinctively. She let him hold it for a second. Warmth. Steady. Dangerous. You said control matters, she whispered. Then keep it. He felt something tighten in his chest. This is not control, he said. This is fear. No, she replied gently. This is protection. For you. She didn't say the last words aloud. I won't be the reason your empire fractures, she continued. Or the reason your enemies find courage. His grip tightened slightly. You don't get to decide that alone. I already have. Her voice didn't tremble. That frightened him more than if it had. She stepped out of his reach. I'll submit my resignation tomorrow, she said. The wind moved between them, cool and relentless. For a man who had never chased anyone, who had never begged for anyone to stay, the urge rose sharp and unfamiliar. Nia. He paused. You don't have to fight alone anymore, he said. She met his eyes. I've been fighting alone my whole life, she replied softly. I know how. Then she walked away. And for the first time since he built his empire from ruin, Han Seojun felt something slip beyond his control. Nia's resignation was processed by morning. Efficient, quiet, clinical. By afternoon, her security access was revoked. By evening, 3 different board members had requested private meetings with Han Seojun. The timing was not coincidence. It was choreography. Seojun stood in the boardroom alone after the 3rd meeting ended. Hands braced lightly against the polished table. Their arguments had been dressed as concern. Stability, reputation, investor confidence. But beneath it was something sharper. Opportunity. You've allowed sentiment to cloud strategic judgment, Director Kwon had said carefully. Temporary distractions create permanent vulnerabilities. Seojun's response had been measured. I do not make decisions based on sentiment. They didn't believe him. Worse, some of them didn't need to. Because power shifts when doubt spreads. By nightfall, Seojun had doubled internal security and ordered quiet audits on 2 board members. He moved like he always did, precise, controlled. But somewhere across the city, a separate plan was already unfolding. Nia stepped out of the subway station just past 8, coat wrapped tightly against the evening chill. The air smelled faintly of rain. She preferred public transportation now. Less attention, less connection to the empire she was trying to detach from. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. Unknown number. She ignored it. Another buzz. Then a message. Resignation won't protect him. Her steps slowed. A second message followed. Or you. Her heart thudded once hard. She turned instinctively, scanning the street. Office workers hurried past. Traffic lights changed. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. That was what made it worse. Across town, Seojun's phone lit up at the same moment. Security alert. Internal breach. Transport Division. He read the notification once. Transport Division wasn't random. Controlled supply routes. Offshore accounts. Syndicate movement. A coup never announces itself loudly. Pulls foundations first. His jaw tightened. Trace the breach, he ordered calmly into the phone. Lock all secondary accounts. Yes, Chairman. Before the call ended, another line rang. Private, he answered. Silence greeted him at first. You should have let her leave cleanly. The voice was distorted. Mused. Seojun didn't respond. You built a fortress around discipline, the voice continued. Then you placed something soft at its center. The line clicked. A message arrived seconds later. An image. Blurry. Taken from a distance. Nia walking under a streetlight. His pulse stilled. Not quickened. Filled. Cold. He called her immediately. No answer. Again. Nothing. Across the street from where she stood frozen, a black van slowed almost imperceptibly. The door slid open without sound. A hand grabbed her wrist. She inhaled sharply, but another hand covered her mouth before she could scream. The world tilted. Dark fabric. Sharp scent. Then blackness. Seojun's third call went straight to voicemail. His eyes lifted slowly from the phone. Around him the city still glittered. Untouched. But somewhere beneath that polished surface, the empire he had rebuilt with iron discipline was cracking. And this time the fracture had a name. The location arrived 20 minutes later. An abandoned shipping warehouse near the outer docks. Industrial. Isolated. Chosen carefully. Seojun read the message once. Come alone. Bring the signed transfer documents. Or she burns with what you built. No panic moved across his face. Only calculation. Within 10 minutes, legal authorization for emergency transfer of his controlling shares was drafted. Within 15, he had signed preliminary surrender documents. Within 20, he was in the back of a black sedan heading toward the docks. His security team protested. Chairman, this is a trap. I know. Then let us move first. No. His tone ended the discussion. If they wanted leverage, they already had it. The warehouse door groaned open as he stepped inside. The air smelled of oil and rust. Overhead lights flickered weakly. And there she was. Nia sat tied to a metal chair in the center of the concrete floor. Wrists bound. Head bowed. A dark bruise forming along her temple. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single image. He did not rush to her. Emotion invited error. A figure emerged from the shadows. Director Kwon. You disappoint me, Kwon said calmly. I warned you about distraction. You organized this, Seojun replied evenly. Correction, Kwon said. We organized this. Several of us believe your judgment has softened. And kidnapping validates that belief. It proves you can be forced to choose. He held out a folder. Sign the full transfer. Resign as chairman. Relinquish your voting rights. Publicly cite personal reasons. Seojun did not hesitate. He stepped forward, took the folder and signed. Page after page. The empire his grandfather built. The syndicate he salvaged at 17. The networks, the alliances, the power that made his name untouchable. Signed away in less than 3 minutes. He placed the pen down. Release her. Kwon smiled faintly. Of course. A click echoed behind him. Too late. A needle pierced the side of his neck. Cold liquid burned into his bloodstream. His body staggered, vision blurring. You were always too dangerous to leave alive, Kwon said calmly. Even powerless. The men exited swiftly. The heavy doors slammed shut. Then the smell hit him. Gasoline. Flames ignited along the far wall in a violent rush, racing across the floor in bright, hungry lines. The injection dragged at his muscles. His limbs felt weighted, slow. Through thickening smoke, he saw Nia's head lift weakly. Seojun. Her voice was barely audible. That was enough. He forced himself upright, stumbling toward her. Every step felt like wading through concrete. He tore at the ropes binding her wrists, hands shaking violently. The fire climbed higher, heat blistering against his skin. The ropes loosened. Her body slumped forward. He caught her. She was conscious but fading. "You signed," she whispered, realizing. "It doesn't matter," he replied. 'Cause it didn't. Power meant nothing if she died in front of him. The flames roared closer. Smoke thickened, burning his lungs raw. He dragged her toward the side wall, scanning desperately. A small reinforced window sat above stacked crates. He positioned her against the wall, used his remaining strength to kick at the metal grating. Once. On the third strike, the metal bent. Glass shattered outward. Cold night air rushed in. He lifted her first, pushing her through the opening despite the tremor in his arms. Then he pulled himself after her. They hit the gravel outside hard. The warehouse behind them erupted in a burst of fire that lit the docks like sunrise. He rolled onto his back, lungs tearing with every breath. The empire was gone, burned or signed away. But as Nia coughed beside him, alive, Seojun understood something with absolute clarity. He had never been more powerful than the moment he chose her over everything. The fire burned until dawn. By morning, the headlines were already spinning a controlled version of events. Industrial accident. Internal restructuring. Chairman steps down for personal reasons. The empire did not collapse. Shifted. Hospitals and shipping ports still opened on time. Investors still smiled for cameras. Director Kwon stood before reporters that afternoon, calm and confident, announcing strategic leadership realignment. But power had changed hands through fear. And fear never ruled as cleanly as discipline. Seojun watched the press conference from a private hospital room, an oxygen line resting lightly beneath his nose. Burns wrapped across his shoulder. A bandage covered the injection wound at his neck. He looked diminished only in paperwork. Nia sat beside the bed, fingers laced loosely with his. A small cut along her temple had been stitched. Her eyes were clearer now. "Steadier. You should be angry," she said quietly, watching the broadcast. "I am. At them." His gaze shifted to her. "Not at you." Guilt flickered across her face. "You gave up everything." "I gave up control," he corrected. "Not everything." Silence lingered between them, not heavy but thoughtful. For the first time since she had met him, there was no security detail outside the door. No executives waiting for instructions. No assistants hovering with reports. Just quiet. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. "Of being powerless?" "Yes." He considered the question carefully. "For years, I believed power meant insulation," he said. "Distance. Immunity from consequence. And now?" He turned his head toward her fully. "Now I think power is choosing what matters and accepting the cost." Her fingers tightened around his. "You don't regret it?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. Across the city, rumors began to circulate. Several board members questioned Kwon's sudden consolidation of authority. Contracts were reviewed. Old alliances resurfaced. Men who respected Seojun's leadership, not his fear, began quietly reaching out. Power once surrendered was not always lost. Sometimes it waited. 3 days later, Seojun was discharged. He didn't return to the penthouse. Instead, he stood with Nia on a rooftop overlooking the Han River. No guards, no headlines, just wind and open sky. "What happens now?" she asked. "I rebuild." She studied him carefully. "Another empire. A different one. Less visible. Less dependent on men who mistook ruthlessness for strength." He reached for her hand. Not urgently, not possessively. Steadily. "I spent 15 years convincing myself I didn't need anyone," he said. "I built walls so high I forgot what they were protecting. And now I choose without fear." Her breath caught slightly at that. The city lights began to flicker on below them. "I won't leave again," she said quietly. "I know." No demand. No condition. Just trust. For the first time in his life, Han Seojun did not measure what he had lost. He measured what remained. A woman who had walked away to protect him. A heart he had tried to freeze and failed. An empire stripped to its foundation, ready to be rebuilt not from fear but from choice. The untouchable king had fallen. And in the quiet aftermath, he had discovered something far more dangerous than power. He had discovered love without fear.